got a couple more. Cool.
All right, we're gonna get started. So thanks for coming to the WGA. I think this is the third WGA social mechanic in Green Bay.
Woohoo!
So that's pretty cool. Today basically we've got a guest speaker, Tim Gerritsen. I'll get into that in a little bit. We also have at 6 o'clock or before, whenever this is done, we're over in the rooftop of Title 10. So they gave us that and complimentary drinks on WGA. So thank you, WGA. I'm on the WGA board now, so thanks. Anyway, let me introduce you to Tim Gerritsen. Tim, my memories of Tim go way back. I was running a company here called Frozen Codebase for a while. Tim was running Big Rooster, but Tim goes even prior to that at places like FAFSA, and Dynamics, and Human Head, and Lost Boys, and I don't know, I'm probably missing like 5
Irrational.
Irrational, Battleshack. Yeah, which Battleshack Infinite, right? So,
Yep.
Yeah. So like Tim, like my favorite thing to mention about Tim is like when I started doing biz dev for Frozen Codebase, which was like trying to get publishers and stuff. I went to DICE in Vegas, which is a big game conference, and hooked up with Tim, and we hung out and stuff, and
In a platonic way.
Right, platonic. Strictly platonic. Yes. Well, we're on camera, so we can't. Anyway, so we were hanging out, and immediately I recognized that basically everyone in the industry knows Tim, and I think that's pretty much still the case. So I'm really glad to have Tim here. Thanks for coming, Tim, and I'll let you have the floor.
Absolutely. Thank you. Looks like there's still one comfy chair over here if anybody's like looking. All right. Thanks. First of all, I want to thank WGA and also the folks at Green Bay inviting me up here. Thank you very much. WGA is for the entire state of Wisconsin, and as a co-founder of the WGA, I'm super excited that it's spread as it has, that it's encompassing the whole state, encompassing the whole vision. So again, I'm Tim Gerritsen. I'm retired now after 34 years of game development, but I don't ever step away. I still am involved in many ways and keeping my eye as to what's going on. So Ben asked me to come do a talk. I said, well, do you want me to do a talk about the state of the industry? And I said, it might be depressing. He said, no, let's do it. Let's rip the Band-Aid off. Let's have a talk. So I was going to come up and just have a dumpster fire and then just leave. But no, I decided I'm going to do a little more than that. This is fine. We're all fine. I'm going to go into the good, the bad, and the ugly, but I'm going to do it in reverse order. I'm going to start with the ugly, and start with the bad, and then we'll get to the good, because I can't leave you all depressed walking out of here.
There will be drinks.
What's that?
There will be drinks later.
Yes, there's drinks later. That's true. All right, so keeping up with all this is maddening. In just the last few weeks, if you've been following anything, it's been nuts. Every day is filled with game news. We got Xbox is back. They had this wonderful, they have the new CEO. They're saying all the right things. They had a fantastic game showcase. I would argue the best of the three, better than Nintendo, better than Sony. Looked amazing. A week later, oh yeah, those studios are going away. We just showed the games so that would help sell them. Oh no, we're losing money. Xbox is going to close studios. Hey, let's raise prices too. And then we're going to close more studios. So it's been a fun couple of weeks.
But wait, there's more.
Sony, let's raise prices. What the hell? Everybody's doing it. Sony's taking away purchases from people with no refunds, because why not? And we're going to start a whole bold new digital future where you don't get to own anything, and we have the right to remove from the store at any point with no refunds. They did all that in a couple of weeks. They're ending physical media. Steam raised all their deck prices by $300, which is no small raise. Steambox, hey, it's finally coming out. Hey, it's $1,000 for the low-end one. It's $1,500 if you want the high-end one, and all of them, frankly, are overpriced. And even Steam was like, you know what? We're going to release SteamOS for free, so why don't you make your own box and just stick SteamOS on it? You probably could get a better deal. So they're just going to sell out their inventory, I suspect, and that'll be that. And then more team shutdowns, more closures beyond Xbox, because Xbox wasn't enough. It's kind of been ugly. So what's going on? Everybody's like, oh my God, it's the end of the world. It's all coming to an end. We're having another game crash. The industry is dying. All the videos coming out about how horrible everything is, and the sky's falling, and we're cooked. It's collapsing. It's the end of the world. So what's the real story? I don't think there's going to be a Crash 2. I'm old, so I was around for Crash 1, and I'll get into that a little later. But I don't think there's going to be a Crash 2. I think the industry is changing, undergoing major changes, but I do not think there's going to be a wholesale crash. At least not in the current business climate. But the video game industry is going through fundamental changes right now. And I don't think we're going to know what those changes are going to portend for us for some time. I think the impact of these is going to take time to shake out. I think we still aren't there yet. There's no rainbow pointing to their direction. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. There's no train at the end of the tunnel. We just don't know yet. I think it's going to take time. So how do we get here? I've always been a history buff. My degree was in history before I got into games. I love history. Let's talk history. So how did we get here? So let's, real briefly, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but there's the pre-VCS era. So this is the era of arcades, where you went into a smoky, dark room filled with neon lights and TV monitors and really scary-looking people, and you had a hell of a lot of fun for 25 cents a pop. For 25 cents, you had 1 to 5 minutes, basically, for most people, of entertainment. And then there was Pong, if you wanted to play at home. And in 1 to 5 minutes, you'd be bored out of your mind, because Pong was pretty boring. But it was cool tech for the time. That was the pre-era. Then we got the VCS era, which next year will be the 50th anniversary of the release of the Atari VCS, which to me, honestly, does herald in the home console era, because Pong and the stuff that came before was really limited. VCS 2600, as it was called later, was the first real console in our industry, and that's next year, 50 years. Late 70s, early 80s. They sold 15 million units by 1984, which doesn't sound much when we get into the later numbers, but back then that was a phenomenon. 15 million units was mind-blowing back then. It was a different era. So they also, Sears sold their own version of the Atari VCS. It was called the Telestar. It was literally a VCS where they just put a different brand on it and sold it through Sears. And television came out. That was the next console. They sold 3 million units, which doesn't sound like a ton these days. It would be a total failure if somebody launched hardware today, but it was considered a major success at the time. And then ColecoVision, also 2 million units, was also considered a major success at the time. Then, if you want to know more about this, if you want to know more about this era, at MDev in November, I'm going to be giving a talk on this period on Space Invaders in 1979 and that whole era. The talk is about the history of Space Invaders, history of home Space Invaders, how games were sold then. And I'm excited about it because I'm going to hopefully do it in a very entertaining manner and tell you a story. But if you want to go to MDev, come see my talk then. That was my plug for MDev. Then we get to the crash. Okay, so the video game crash, 1983-84. I think it was widely misunderstood. They did kill Atari VCS, but not Atari. Atari continued on. The VCS was essentially dead. They kept selling it as a cheap, somebody bought the rights to sell them cheap. So you can go to like Walgreens and buy a cheap VCS. It did kill Intellivision and ColecoVision. They were gone, dead, not coming back. And yes, they really did dump Atari cartridges in the New Mexico desert outside Alamogordo. That was considered a wives' tale or crazy story. And then somebody actually went out and dug it up and went, yep, they dumped a bunch of cartridges here. That actually happened. But gamers went to computers. This is the most misunderstood part. Yes, VCS died, but Ben, you probably remember, people went to the VIC-20, the Commodore 64, the Apple II, the Atari 8-bit, all these great computers out there. Crappy little Sinclair, which was essentially a rebranded Sinclair computer from England, resold in the United States by Timex. Commodore sold 13.5 to 17 million. The company was really chaotic and they don't really know for sure. They think it was 17, could be 13 and a half. Atari only sold 4 million 8-bit, which surprised me because Ataris were everywhere. And I was really surprised there were only 3 million Apple IIs, because if you ever went to a high school back then, there were like 10 in every computer lab, yeah. But in Europe and Japan, consoles never died. They just kept plugging away. The crash was just here in the United States. And of course, that led to the coming of Japan. Japan was about to make a huge impact on the United States. So then we get to the golden years. This is a whole big period of time. This is the late 80s and the 90s. A lot of hardware covered in this period. Nintendo, 62 million units, came out in 85. Super Nintendo, 49 million units. N64, 33 million units. Now again, the Atari was 15 million. And Atari was considered a huge phenomenon. It was everywhere. Everyone knew what it was. But now, look at these numbers. Sega Master System, 13. Genesis, I worked for Sega at the very tail end of Genesis and during the unfortunate 32X period. 31 million, 10 million on Saturn, 9 million on Dreamcast, which was the end of their hardware. PlayStation 1, 102 million. PlayStation 2, 160 million, which today remains the highest selling video game console in the world. Switch is close, though. Xbox, 24 million, which again, 15 for Atari, 24 for the original Xbox. The business model combined physical sales. This is when we had it all. This was Friday night. You go down to your Blockbuster, your Family Video. There's a wall of video games. They have 50 copies of Mortal Kombat. If you had money, your mom would let you buy, or you would buy Mortal Kombat at the store. If you didn't have money, like most people, you would go to the Family Video and you hope to God they had Mortal Kombat sitting there, and then you take it home for the weekend, you play it with your friends at home. There were so many bites at the apple. You had initial sale, you had resale. This is when Funko-Land started, which later became GameStop. That whole market, that resale, that market emerged during this period. And this was sort of the golden age, because you released a game, but you got multiple bites at the apple, because there was multiple ways people were accessing these games. It wasn't just, I download it, I'm done. It was, oh, I'm gonna give it to my friend and loan it to them for the weekend and maybe they go buy it. Or I'm gonna sell it to my friend and then I'll use that money to go buy a new video game. So back then, physical was king. It was everywhere. So the business model then, I miss it. To me, that was the golden era, because that's when you could make games, you could make a ton of money, and you continue to make money. There were opportunities for many people to make money off of games. Then we had the coming of online, and the coming of the 360 and the PlayStation 3. So let's talk about that. This is the pre-COVID era. Games start to go online. And initially it was a lot of fun. If you remember those days, first time with a camera, I bought a camera because we wanted to check out how camera games played, just to see if this market was going to develop. And literally the first person I connect with, it's just a picture of his wall, and he goes, "I'm naked, dude." I'm like, okay, no, this isn't a thing yet. I'll come back to this later. But it was when games go online. Digital direct sales start to grow. You had Nintendo GameCube, 21 million units. Wii, 101 million. Wii U, 13 million units. Xbox 360, 85 million units. Xbox One, 58 million units, because they like to reverse their digits. PlayStation 3, 87 million. And the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 were neck and neck worldwide, which was the best Xbox has ever done. PlayStation 4, 117 million. And then you have the convenience of downloads versus physical. You could still go buy if hey, I want to go to get it now, or you could download a game, but it took forever because your internet was slow and the games were big. But it was really the death knell of the rental market at that point. It's like, why go rent it if I can just buy it online? And that sort of ended that. So then we get into the harsher area, the COVID era. Games as a service explosion. This is when it all sort of just went nuts. Oh, I'm not just going to play a game. I have a lifestyle now. And that's where you have the emergence of Roblox and Minecraft. These are games that, it used to be I'd play a game a weekend, I move on to the next game, play that one for a weekend, I move on to the next game, I play that for a weekend, I move on to the next game. This is the era of, this is now my life. I'm playing, Minecraft is my thing. Roblox is my thing. Online games are my thing. World of Warcraft sort of was that for a while, but now it's spread everywhere. And everybody started worshiping at that altar. Games as a service, subscription fees, or we're gonna sell you extra stuff. We're gonna make more money by selling you stuff. You get the game for 50, 60 bucks, but you're gonna spend more and more and more and more because we're gonna sell you more in the game. But then the numbers started going down. Xbox Series has only been 34 million combined. PlayStation 5 is 93 million. That's pretty impressive. Still behind where PlayStation 4 was. Nintendo Switch, though, that's sort of a reverse thing. Suddenly you had cartridges again. Suddenly you had games made for multiplayer again. Remember sitting at a couch and playing with your friends? And, like Halo, and like that was cool. You turn on the machine, everybody grabs a controller, and boom, you're gone. Have you tried to do that recently? It is a pain in the ass. You're like, okay, where's the multiplayer couch play? And you search for like 20 minutes through the menus. You're like, okay, I think this is it. And then, oh, everybody's got to have their own account. You can't just like play X1, X2, X3. You all have to have your own accounts. So you're like, crap, Bob doesn't have an account. Come on, Bob, get with it. He's got to make an account. Okay, I'm making an account. Okay, I got my account. Now I can play. By then, it's an hour has passed and everybody wants to go do something else. And then I think we lost something when we lost that. And it's the death knell of retail sales. Retail is basically dead for video games. You could go to Target, you'll find there's still PlayStation 5, there's a tiny little Xbox area, maybe, and there's a nice Nintendo area, but that area gets smaller and smaller and smaller and more depressing every time you go in. So it's getting sad. And then we get to today, post-COVID, yay! And where are we today? Well, yesterday, I like to watch RGT85 on video. If you ever see him, he's very entertaining. He's from New Jersey. He's like this New Jersey kid who does videos on video games. His big saying is, yesterday's price is not today's price is not tomorrow's price. And he's right. For the first time in video games, something new has happened. And we don't really talk about it enough. We don't really recognize about it. Everybody bitches about it, but nobody, wait a minute. This never happened before. What the hell's going on? Atari launched at $199, end of life was $129. NES launched at $199, end of life was $129. Genesis launched at $189, end of life was $149. Super Nintendo, $199, $129, because they like to mirror themselves. Sega Saturn, $399, end of life $149. PlayStation 1 launched at $299, end of life $129. Now we have unprecedented change. PlayStation launched at $399, end of life was $299. I'm not counting Pro. Xbox One launched at $499, end of life was $299. I'm not counting Xbox One X. Switch One is where it changed, which surprised me. $299 was their launch. It is now, if you want to go, you can still buy Switch One, but it's $339, so it's more expensive. PlayStation 5 launched at $399 or $499, depending on whether you wanted a disc or not. Now it's $599 or $649, depending if you want a disc or not. And I would not be surprised if they raise it again before Christmas. Xbox Series X, 3 times they've raised it. It started at $499, it's now $799. That's new, that's never happened before. And then Switch 2 launched at $449. They only raised it $50. They almost seem like fair. They're only going 50. And then I haven't talked about the glorious PC Master Race, which I will talk about now. We got the Steam Juggernaut with Gabe. 16.9 billion in revenue generated on Steam last year. Just 2025. 1.6 billion in December alone. 4 billion by Valve alone. So the 16.9 is everything. 4 is just Valve. But weirdly, I looked into Sony's stuff, and Sony, 31 billion, including hardware. So I was like, wait a minute, Steam seems like a juggernaut, but Sony's still making money. Xbox, who keeps talking about how much money they're losing, did 23 billion, including hardware last year. I think they are losing money now, but last year last year they reported a profit. And then Nintendo, I was really surprised by this, only 7.6 billion, which really surprised me because their market is huge, but only 7.6 billion. Only. What's a billion here and there between friends? And this is what I wanted to talk about. This is where it all leads me. This is the scary part, and this is sort of the reality, especially for independent developers. There were over 20,000 games last year released on Steam. Just last year. If you put a game out, there's never been a lower barrier to entry. I love that. That's awesome. But you're competing with 20,000 other games. Just in 1 year. There are 125,000 games in total on Steam. Because you could buy everything that's still available. Unfortunately, one of my games is no longer still available, but you're diving into a very steep market. And then there's some really, did I miss it? Here's the sad stats. Of the 20,000 games released last year, only 608 received at least 1,000 reviews. Of 20,000. Half received less than 10. So 10,000 games got 10 or less reviews. And only 3 out of 1,600 2D platformers reached that threshold. So only 3 got 10 or more reviews. That's nuts. Only 6,000 games earned $100,000 gross. Not net, gross. So if you spent $500,000 and grossed $100,000, you lost $400,000. And like I said, there are 125,000 active games as of June 1st of this year. It's probably now 127,000 because that's how quickly they launch. So yeah, this is fun. It's kind of sad and scary. There you go.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
But is it game over? Well, no, there's no video game crash. But this is the scary and sad part. I believe fundamentally American game development is shrinking permanently. I'm not saying it's going away. It's definitely not going away. And I don't want to put dampers on people who want to make games. I'll get to that part. But the reality is the industry we had is not coming back the way it was. It is reforming now. It will reform in a new form, but it will be smaller. It will not be what we had before. And that's frightening, but unfortunately the reality. I want to go into a little bit. I'm not going to go into this in detail. You can look up on this particular website, epilion.co. They put out something in April called the State of Video Gaming in 2026, Growth and Where to Find It. It's 167 some slides of data. I encourage you, if you're into this, to download it and go through the data. Some really fascinating finds. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time, but this is like one example. The global video game content sales actually went up last year, 5.3% year over year, and hitting all new high of 195.6 billion, 10 more than the previous high in 2021. So the industry actually got bigger last year, which, if you follow things, is probably shocking or scary or weird. But I'll get into why. I'm not going to go into detail on them, but this is the kind of data you'll find. 55% reduction from the previous year in game investment, and that was already down. So yeah, it's down. Again, I'm not going to go into super detail on these slides, but to get an idea, if you want to get that data, you can go out to that website. It is free. You don't have to pay for it, which is awesome. But in a nutshell, revenue's up. As I showed, according to the data, revenue is definitely up. Profit's down, though. That's a problem. Too many games are sharing the same revenue pool. Like I said, 20,000 came out on Steam. And I couldn't really find good data on Sony and Xbox launches. Steam is very open with all their data. Xbox, Sony are not. Nintendo is not. They're spending more and more on games, but they're making the same amount of money. So if you spent $100 million last time on a AAA game, this time you're like, oh, I'll spend $120 million or $150 million. But you're still only making the same amount of revenue you made off the last game. So now you're spending more money, you're making the same amount of revenue. That's a problem, and that happened across the industry. A lot of niche games got made at AAA prices. And unfortunately, that's why a lot of the Xbox studios are getting caught up. Because they went and said, hey, you guys are awesome. They bought all these niche studios, said, you guys make awesome niche games. Here's a checkbook, go wild. They did. They made the same games they always make. They're cool games, but they sold niche amounts of units. So you can't afford to do that. That's just not good business practice. And they're spending way too much time on games. I was reading about a game today, 7 years in development, still not out yet. Was that one of the Xbox studios, the zombie game, drawing a blank. Yes, State of Decay. 7 years in development. It's like crazy. That's a lot of money. Because I guarantee you, having employed people who have to work on stuff, if you're sitting around for 7 years, even if you're working really hard, you're spending a lot of money, and you better make that money back. Having Microsoft as your checkbook was awesome while it lasted, but even Microsoft hit a wall. And if you get that report, it goes into actually a lot of the world's growth, because the numbers are up. A lot of that growth's in China. But unfortunately, China is semi-closed to Western developers. You can get into China, it's hard. You have to have a local studio. There's a bunch of hoops you got to jump through, and even then, you can get your game pulled. And a lot of the growth, a lot of Chinese companies are growing. They're building games that sell around the world and locally. So they're building stuff for their own domestic market, but they're also building worldwide games, and they're doing very well. So a lot of the growth is coming out of there in terms of money earned. Employment is actually up, but not here. Not in the United States, not in Europe, at least not Western Europe. And that's mainly due to cost. And the reality is, and this is scary, last year, the average cost per man month was around $20K per person per month in the United States to develop games. And this is a rule of thumb. Some studios are going to be higher, some are going to be lower. Depends on what level. I mean, if you're like a senior level graphics engineer, you're probably making more than a junior level QA person, but it's averaged. Average is $20K a man month. In China, it's just under 10, and in the global south, it's just under 6. So a lot of studios started looking around going, wait a minute. I know we all talk about AI, and I know AI has been used justification for removing a lot of jobs, but a lot of those jobs are actually going to global south. And that's India, Southeast Asia, South America, Middle East, Africa, a lot of these places. That's where the jobs are happening, and at a fraction of what they would pay here in the US. So, I missed one. And finally, we're losing mind share. It's mainly TikTok doom scrolling, and people, they get on, they start watching videos, and 3 hours later, it's like, I gotta go to bed. That used to be video games. Now we're competing with those sorts of things. And it's getting tougher. So my thoughts. Games are rapidly splitting into two tiers. High-end gaming is becoming a luxury good. That has implications for how it affects business and how it affects development. $1,000 hardware is not sustainable in what's called a K-shaped recovery. A K-shaped recovery, essentially K-shaped economy is when if you are rich enough or lucky enough to have your income derived from stocks, and as long as there isn't a 2029 event, or you're just fabulously wealthy to begin with, your money and your buying power keeps going up. Meanwhile, everybody else, your salaries haven't really gone up in the United States in the last 10 years. Buying power has gone dramatically downward, and that's the downward part of the K. So if it feels like, wow, I can't afford as much stuff as I could 10 years ago, that is absolutely real, and that is you're on the downside of that K. So the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, is essentially what that means. For everybody always talks about it, but if you look into the economic data, especially since COVID, that's reality. That is happening. The buying power of the average person is going down. We are going back to an economy that we haven't really seen since the 30s, the 40s, like right after the Great Depression or right before like the Great Depression. Great Depression has its own set of data, but we are seeing something in the United States that we actually did have, but we grew past that. The 50s, 60s, 70s, the United States economy just kept booming and booming and booming in the 80s and the 90s. And now we are facing this split. So you're seeing this because the next Xbox is going to be over 1,000. Steam is over 1,000, the Steam machine. The next Xbox, the next Sony. Sony, I wouldn't put past them to put it out at $999 so they could say, see, we're under 1,000. Nintendo will keep climbing, but I don't think they'll get that high, but they'll still be higher than they are now. And they're pretty high right now at $599. And we've killed our secondary markets, so you can no longer just buy games and hand them to your friends or sell them to your friends. You can go to rummage sales and buy 30-year-old games and 20-year-old games, but you can't buy 5-year-old games. Because once you buy it, once you download it, there's no way to trade it. There's no digital trade economy. There's no secondary market at all. And going to an all-digital future practically guarantees this will continue. So, because I can't share my music, I can't share well, there are ways, but there's no legal ways to just hand off your music. And not a lot of developers, I don't think, are set up to go into a luxury market. Luxury market has certain implications. What I say here about McDonald's, if McDonald's started charging $15 a burger, but they put it in cool packaging and had a cool place to hang out while eating it, it's still a McDonald's hamburger. You can't, if you're McDonald's, you're not going to turn around tomorrow and be, well, hey, we're totally luxury now, come on down. No one's going to go there. Apple is a luxury good. They have, you've been to their stores, they got the weird geniuses, and they're all like I don't know what they're on, but it's kind of creepy. And they run around and they're selling you their cool product. They make a luxury experience. You get the cool box, you get the cool stuff in the box. When you open an Apple device, you're like, wow. When you open most PCs, you just rip the box open and you got hardware sitting there. Luxury implies certain things. I read an article the other day, Five Guys started as a luxury brand. Do any of you consider Five Guys a luxury brand now? And then you compare that to Shake Shack. Shake Shack is considered a luxury brand as well, but Shake Shack designed themselves from the ground up. It feels like a luxury experience. Five Guys feels like a cheap hamburger at a diner, but for a price of a luxury. And that, for that reason, Five Guys has been dropping dramatically, while people like Shake Shack are making hand over fist, because rich people, believe it or not, they don't care if it's a $15 burger or a $3 burger. They want the luxury experience, because to them it doesn't matter. But to everybody else, you're like, well, if I'm going to pay 50 cents less for a burger, I'm going to get the 50-cent less burger because it's saving me 50 cents. Rich people don't care about that per se, because their buying power continues to climb. It's just the new price. Everybody else is like, shit, what am I going to cut out of my life now because everything's so expensive? And then there's the value market, which is the low end. This is retro, remnants of what's left of the secondary market, which are like used stores, vintage stores. And the low barrier to entry in Steam, GOG, and elsewhere online allows easier sales of non-mainstream games. So if you're a smaller indie, this is the market you're going to be in. You can create a luxury good if you're a smaller studio, but it's not easy, because usually you have to spend a lot of money to make a luxury good feel like a luxury good. Hardware cost reduces game access. The more expensive it gets, the market's going to get smaller. It will reach a tipping point and get smaller year on year. It grew last year. I think this year it'll grow again because of growth worldwide, but eventually it will reach a tipping point and it will shrink. This forces a rethink on how hardware is purchased. Are we going to see game hardware sold like phones? Are we finally going to see cloud gaming actually make sense? Because I just buy basically a delivery video display and then get everything through the internet. Because for a while, these have failed because nobody wants that. But if it's the only way you can access games, maybe that's the world we're going to. I don't know. And then an all digital future creates its own issue. As a historian, no preservation. Like right now, I have a ton of old games at home, and I have enough stuff to basically fund a museum or stock a museum at home. You won't get that anymore. I can't give you my digital games. There's no secondary market. There's no sharing. If Gabe goes away, if Steam goes away, all those games, what happens? You have no preservation ability. If people remember GameSpy, when GameSpy went away, suddenly you couldn't play online games, a ton of online games, because GameSpy just died and shut all their servers off. So where does that leave development in Wisconsin? So that's the bad and the ugly, okay? I'm not gonna depress you anymore. I'm mainly gonna talk to indies. So this is mainly geared, hopefully, I think this audience is mostly indies, but if you've got a development studio, I'll have a couple things to say. But mainly I'm focusing instead indies. Gotta let indie shoot in, there you go. Okay, fundamentally, this is what it means, right? If you're going to have a future in the games industry, you are going to have to make it yourself. It is almost impossible to get a dev deal right now. Bill Roper, who made the original Diablo, he's had a ridiculously hard time getting a deal. People with big names have had ridiculously hard times getting deals for the last several years. And if you're an indie, it's going to be very hard to get a deal. Although if the Chinese call, answer the phone, because they've got funding. Getting funding is very difficult, either as a publisher or as an investment. It can be done. I'm not saying don't do it, or if you're trying to do that now, it's impossible, but it's very, very hard. So let's talk about what can you do. Well, let's talk Roblox for a minute. They did $4.8 billion in independent developer revenue last year. 1.5 was earned by those developers, and they have 132 million daily users, which to me is just mind-boggling. Even today, after all of the controversy on Roblox, if you want to make games for Roblox, that's the link. And all of this, despite major legal issues, major ethical issues they've been running with, they're still a humongous juggernaut, and they're still growing. Be aware it's a slim margin. They take a 70% cut, or no, they take a 30% cut. You get the 70, just like Steam, right? But that's in Robux, and then you have to convert Robux to cash, and then the split's reversed. You get 30% of the value in dollars. So you're getting a 30% cut of a 70% cut. So but there's 16-year-old kids making six figures on Roblox because they're making content for it. It is an open platform. It is now a platform, not just a game. Retro games. This one's exciting to me. Oh, and I brought a prop for this. I forgot to bring it out. Retro is huge and getting bigger because people like physical product. They like the old games. They like simplistic games. And when I say simplistic, I don't mean simplistic as bad. I mean simplistic as in they're fun. You get in, you get out. It's fun for half an hour. You don't have to dedicate your life to it. It's not games as a service. You're not choosing a lifestyle. You're playing a game. Evercade, I picture here as a big one. They're out of England. They make several different pieces of hardware. This is the cheapest entry. It's only $60. These are cartridges. They will work with indie developers. You can approach them. This game, Roguecraft, came out for the Amiga, which has been dead since, I was an Amiga guy, but the Amiga's been dead since. Yeah, it's true. That's true. It never died. But they stopped selling them around 93, 94. It's been a long time. This was released for the Amiga back in 2024. They released it as a cartridge for Evercade last year. This is the cheapest entry for the hardware. It's $65. You can get a full console where you can play multiplayers for like 150, I think. And then they got a handheld that I have right here that you could get for like 150 as well. So you kind of pick how you want to play. But the cartridges work on all of them. And they work with indie developers. They have indie cartridges where they'll get like 4 or 5 indie developers together and they'll put them on a cartridge. And then you get physical product. How cool is that? So I think retro is a major market for people to look at. There are people making games for Game Boy. There are people making games for the original NES, the original SNES. If you've ever been to Midwest Gaming Classic down in Milwaukee, you can buy most of these games. I'm still buying games for Vectrex. People are making Vectrex games, and they're unbelievably cool. It's like, wow, they did this on a Vectrex. And people are still doing it. They're still finding a market. Now, you're not going to buy a Maserati. You're not going to buy a McLaren, but you will be able to pay your rent if you put out a hit game that is in the retro market. There are entree points for this, and these games are cheaper to make because they're not nearly as complex if you're smart about how you go about it. And frankly, they're usually a hell of a lot of fun. So if you played any of these, indie games for this. If you ever watch 8-Bit Guy on YouTube, he's made several games for this market. He has a card out for Evercade, but it's definitely something you could do. The hybrid board game market, I used to work for FASA, and I also worked for Fantasy Flight. So weirdly, I've worked for 2 predominantly board game companies in the video game world for both companies. But they have this thing called hybrid board game, where you download an app that is usually free, and you play it with your board game. They're usually simpler to make because the board game already has the rules set up, so it's easier to lay out the architecture. So then it's all about graphic design. It's all about UI. It's all about what features you want to augment that board game experience. Now, some board game players hate them, some love them, and frankly, it's like anything. Some are really good, some are really bad, but it is another option. And these usually are on mobile, they're on Steam. You can get them all over the place. And then indie dev on Steam and GOG. Again, this is a hard road because of the numbers. It's no longer enough just put out a great game. You make a great game. It used to be you made a great game, everybody went, wow, it's a great game, they buy it. Now you gotta have a marketing person, you gotta have a community director who's out there managing things. You gotta okay, and you gotta really be out there. You gotta announce your game months ahead of time, talk to the players directly, don't talk down to them, talk right to them, get their feedback, listen to that feedback. Games like Rust made their fortunes by doing exactly that. We should just make games, put them out. We love that because most of us were nerds who just wanted to stay in our office and make games. You got to think socially. You got to think social media. You got to get your product out there. You got to get people wanting your game before you ever make it for sale. And that's the hard part. And then you're competing with a ton of other games because Steam has their magic algorithm that they will not share. How am I doing on time? We're almost there at the end.
Yeah, 7 minutes.
Oh, okay. PEO is mainly for developers, and you'll probably hate me for even bringing this up. What a PEO is, if you are an American developer, American company, it's important to think about this. What a PEO is, if I want to open up a studio in Global South, that's a lot of money. I got to move to South America. I got to move to the Middle East. I got to move to Indonesia. I got to move to Vietnam. I got to move, somewhere if I want to start a studio. What a PEO is a professional employment organization. They are someone you hire to basically employ people. There are PEOs in the US. There's a big one down in Madison. There's one here in Green Bay. They do it locally as well. You technically work for the PEO. You don't work for the company, but you are part of the company. What this allows you to do is if you're a developer in the US, you can hire a full team down South America. You can do it strategically. Like I just need programmers, but I want my art here. I just want designers here. I just want the artists there and I want the programmers here. However you want to do it, this is a way to do it. A lot of companies who are smaller, this allows them to hit above their weight by having a global reach without having to spend globally, because you just hire a PEO in those places. Don't hate me. I'm just telling you, I never did this. We talked about doing it. We never did it, but it's becoming more and more of a thing because if you're a smaller company in the United States and you don't have the money, this is a way for you to be able to sustain. And then this is a headline from Milwaukee paper, but did you know Wisconsin has a surprisingly strong video game industry and lawmakers want to help it? For the last 3 years, we're working on a Wisconsin tax break that is very much the Canadian mold. It's a 30% tax break. What it means is the company really doesn't see any of that money. What happens is you employ somebody, 30% of their salary is refunded or is deducted, essentially paid by the state at the end of the year. They have to work in the state of Wisconsin that entire time. Can't be a remote employee. PEO ain't gonna work. You can't submit for that. It's gotta be someone who worked the entire time in the state of Wisconsin. You get a 30% tax break. Okay, so you don't have to pay that money out. That money stays within the company. So it makes it cheaper essentially to employ people in Wisconsin. That's how the Canadian tax breaks work. They have varying tax breaks across, depending on the province. We've been trying to get this going for the last 3 years here in Wisconsin. I'm hoping this year. It's weird where the holdups have been. I wouldn't have expected the people who held it up to be the ones who held it up, and I wouldn't have expected the people who were propelling it to be the ones who propelled it. We got a lot of bipartisan support, but it It just isn't getting to the floor, and that's the key. We have to get it to the floor. It's getting shut down by higher ups before it gets to the floor. This year, we're hoping with there's an election this year. Hopefully, we can get it through. It'll probably be March by the time it happens, just because of the calendar of how legislation works in the state of Wisconsin. But we're going to try again this year. And I'm going to leave you with David Allen. He's an old guy who has a fun smile, and he says, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. And this is important. You can do anything, but if you try to do everything, and this is my problem, I'm always trying to do everything. I'm working on like 15 projects at home right now all at once. You can't do everything. You got to pick, you got to focus, you got to make it happen. All right, thanks for listening. And a couple of questions, if anybody, questions, comments, thoughts?
I actually do have a question for you.
Yeah.
It's very, like, sidetracking. You didn't cover like 32X or Sega CD or anything like that. What was everything?
What's what?
32X Sega CD peripherals.
Yeah, I didn't cover those in terms of hardware sales just because I was focusing on the core units. I don't know off the top of my head. I have to look for it. And 3DO, I worked on 3DO games for a while. 3DO did okay. The problem with 3DO, if you remember, it was way too expensive out of the gate. And there was a ton of, we called it Sillywood back then. It was Silicon Valley plus Hollywood. It was a lot of video crap. Yeah, Sewer Shark in it. But there were really good games on it as well. There were some really good games. And I didn't like that. But there were actually some really good games on 3DO as well. But the problem was that just the hardware was way too expensive at the time. It was $600 when everybody else was like $200. And then they never actually sold the hardware. Their whole business plan was, we won't make it. We'll create the technology. We will license it to other people. And they didn't bite. Panasonic put their unit out at $600. Not enough people bought it. Gold Star came out a few years later at, I think, like $400. But by then, yeah, but nobody cared by then. And then there was a PC peripheral card you could put in your PC, but that came out years later and it was too expensive.
From your research, did something like Sega CD help float that mid?
It lengthened their time, but again, I worked for Sega. Okay, if I'm a developer, and I was always like, oh, I want to do the latest hardware when I was a developer. I want to do the latest hardware, I want to do the coolest stuff, because everything was more powerful. Back then, you really were limited in what you could do. And I was like, oh man, the new powers are going to give us more. So it's like, oh, you had the Genesis. Okay, now you got the Sega CD. Well, the Sega CD only had like 2-3 million units, but there's 40 million of the Sega Genesis. It was explained to me, what are you going to make it for? Are you going to make it for potentially 2-3 million sales, or are you going to make it for potentially 30 million sales? And then they added the 32X, and that only sold a few 100,000. It's like, okay, are you going to make for 32X and maybe make a few 100,000, or are you going to sell for the coin? They were subdividing their own audience. Cool ideas, cool tech, and it really did usher. I mean, that period, we went from nothing, just cartridges, to full CD, to full multimedia, like full voice, the whole 9 yards. All that happened very quickly, and they were kind of caught up in that. What they should have done, and they were thinking of doing, is there was a device called the Neptune, which was going to combine them all into one. It never came out, though. They were done by then. Yeah. Jaguar. Oh. I wanted to like Jaguar. Now, here's the weird part. Jaguar was a fail. I went and saw it live. I was like, oh man, I was ready to buy, and I played the games. I'm like, these games are terrible. This controller is garbage. But you know what? Jaguar has one of the strongest post-retro market communities out there. People are making tons of games for Jaguar. Yeah. Yeah, if you go to Midwest Gaming Classic, there are new build Jaguar games all over the place. I don't get it, because the controller's still garbage, but people are making, people love them, and they're making games for it. It is a very strong community out there. If you make a Jaguar game, you will get a lot of notoriety from that gang of people, because they watch everything. And it's a very strong market.
Time for one more question.
Okay, yeah.
I was wondering, what are your thoughts on the Playdate and its place in like the modern retro market?
The which one?
Do you know the Playdate? It's like the one with the arm crank.
No, hasn't even hit my radar.
The Playdate, it's like this big and it has an arm crank in
That's cool.
Big graphics.
Well, I just remember Sega had the fishing controller. You do that.
Yeah, it's one big graphics. It's a niche. It has a niche market. A lot of indie developers love it because then they just get to.
Oh, I think indie development right now is where it's at in terms of innovation. Because AAA to me is just bankrupt of ideas at this point.
We have access to what the AAA boys have.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. Now we have access through AAA tools, but I feel like AAA is just there hasn't been. We've been making the same narrative games since 2007, and over and over and over and over. And it's like there's some cool narrative. I'm a narrative game guy. There are some cool narrative games out there, and the narratives are very strong. But God, the games, it's the same damn game. Yeah, and people are tired of that. Now, partially there's that. Partially it's just, everyone wants to come up with a new way to play, but we're not there. No one has that aha idea. That's why I like where I say, it's changing, but we don't know where it's going yet. I think it's going to take years before we figure out, okay, this is where it's going to be now. Yeah, I think someone's going to come up with an aha idea and it's going to be a major moment. I'm shocked that China hasn't come out with a console yet, because I feel like right now a new console, it's the first time there's really been a moment in a long time where someone could enter the market with a brand new high-level console. Now, you'd have to have a ton of funding and you'd have to focus. And I'm shocked China has the money and the reach and the ability to build them, because they build them all anyway. They could do that. I'm shocked they haven't yet.
So what about, just quickly, talking about a new console, but the Apple Vision Pro went to shit.
Yeah, well,
That was
yeah.
supposed to change spatial computing and stuff.
Yeah, but so was 3D. Yeah, I mean, VR is fun.
Well, what I'm saying is, not just VR, but spatial computing.
Yeah.
What's going to have to be new? Is it going to have to be a holodeck, or can it just be?
I think I personally, I would go back to basics. Like if I was going to start a new company tomorrow, I'd start a couch play company focused on couch play games. You could, bringing everybody back together. You could still play couch play games online. People do. There's couch play games that, if you played the new, the Marvel game that just came out recently, that you can play that out. You can just have random players join your game. A lot of those games, Castle Crashers. What's that?
Rivals.
Yeah, Rivals. Yeah, you can have. But to me, the king of it was when me and my buddies could sit down and just play a game. Everyone didn't have to make a frickin' account. You could just play. You were playing within 5 seconds, not 5 minutes or 50 minutes.
It was so cool.
Yeah.
64 is happening to children. 4 people.
Yeah, exactly. I think I would go back that's me. I think going back that direction, because like after COVID, people want to get back together. We made a ton of money because everybody had to stay home and do nothing but play video games. But now they can get out and they want to get together. We're all here together. People want to be together, and I feel like we lost that. We lost that sense of cooperative play, of just sitting together and seeing the person as you're stomping them on the screen, and that trash talk or the fun, and yeah. But there's the greater market as well. There's no secondary market. There's vintage game stores, which I think retro has a card to play. This is essentially an emulation device. And you can port stuff to it, but a lot of the games on it are retro. But I feel like that's where, personally, I feel like we need to come back to a point where games are fun for us as a group, and it's not just, we've been catering too long to people who just want to sit home and play games. The stereotypical, the old South Park episode of the guy just, sitting and playing his game forever.
Like you said, arcades, games used to be fun.
Yeah. Oh, arcades, you had the whole culture of arcades where if I put a quarter on the screen, that means something. Does everybody know what it means? If you put an arcade, if I put a quarter, I'm next. I own the next game. And it was an inviolate rule. You did not break the quarter rule. That was a huge faux pas, man. If you just kept playing, everyone in the arcade was on you. Somebody puts a quarter down, they get the next game, no questions asked. There was a whole culture there. But we're not going back there. If you just start an arcade, there are a ton of cool arcades. There's 4 retro arcades in Madison right now, which just blows my mind. Yeah. I love them, but it's just not like it used to be. It's a nostalgia trip, which is cool and fun, but it's not sustainable in the long term. So, because most of your new arcade games they're not fun. If you play anything that's a new arcade game, usually they're not very fun.
There's
What's that?
I said there's new arcade games.
Yeah, there are. If you go to like Dave and Buster's, they have there's like, and they've got, there's like a giant Space Invaders wall, and there's, but it's just,
All reaction games too, usually.
yeah. All right, and I will leave you
Yeah, so.
with
thanks,
this.
Tim. Oh,
So thank you all. Let's drink.
good.